Hello, everyone. My name is Paolo Sironi, your host for the Banker's Bookshelf, and this is our episode number 13. The Banker's Bookshelf is your opportunity to learn from the authors and the researchers of the most interesting papers and books that define the present of banking and its fintech future. And today, it is with great pleasure that I host a conversation with Dimitrios Salampasis, the author and editor of the Research Handbook on Fintech. Dimitrios, welcome to the Banker's Bookshelf.
Thank you so much, Paolo, for inviting me. Great pleasure and honor of mine.
Dimitrios, I'm really flattered for the opportunity to talk to you, and also flattered for the fact that you're hosting a little piece of my thought inside this Research Handbook on Fintech, which is a very interesting publication that is really like a very intense, deep compendium of a lot of things that matter in the banking and fintech world. So first of all, a couple of words about yourself and the book itself.
So, Paolo, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Dimitrios Salampasis. I'm an associate professor of emerging technologies and fintech at the Swinburne School of Business Law and Entrepreneurship of the Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne, Australia. This research handbook on fintech, published by Edward Elgar Publishing, it's been co-edited with my dear friend and collaborator, Professor Patrick Schuffel from the School of Management in Fribourg. And of course, since it is a book of fintech, there is no way that you wouldn't be part of it somehow. So I'm really honored that you accepted our invitation to write the foreword. Look, if we think about finance, many years ago, it was dominated by really traditional banks, incumbents, centralized institutions. But today's landscape is changing dramatically. So we've got digitalization, we've got startups building new financial platforms, central banks experimenting with digital currencies, technologies like, AI, blockchain, quantum. Data-driven technologies are reshaping how financial systems operate. So this research handbook on fintech, I think the idea came from the fact that we wanted to help the audience make sense of this transformation. And we decided to bring together international experts and scholars from all around the world. And we actually asked them to step back and think about the following question. What does this transformation actually mean for financial systems, for regulation, for the society, and for all of us? So basically, the book, which is a research handbook on fintech, explores how technology is changing the architecture of finance and what does it actually mean for the future of financial markets and institutions. And it actually tries to map this rapidly evolving landscape and provide a foundation for understanding the future of finance.
So I like that this book provides and crystallizes the real meaning of what is fintech and digital transformation, because sometimes we lose track of the purpose and the scope of what we are doing. Everybody is busy, but it is important to remind that. Why do you believe that now is the time for this book?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest with Patrick, we've been thinking quite a bit, why do we need to curate and host this debate within a research handbook on fintech? We believe that fintech has actually reached now a maturity phase. We're moving beyond the hype that we have seen over the past years into institutionalization and also infrastructure building. So I think the sector right now, it's not only about startups or, newcomers, but it evolves. We've seen global regulation, central banks, big techs, financial incumbents. So basically, the purpose of this research handbook is to capture this evolution from the experimentation phase to what we call a systemic relevance. And basically, fintech nowadays, it's everywhere. It shapes payments, infrastructure, digital assets, identity and trust systems, and also financial inclusion. Therefore, the goal of this handbook is really to create what we call, and we hope that it will create a research foundation for the next decade of digital finance and set up the agenda of what is next in the digital economy. So fintech really is no longer a fringe innovation ecosystem. It is becoming a core financial infrastructure. And this book is actually being placed within this new era of digital transformation in finance.
And that's actually very true, Dimitrios. So not only this book is not about just the startups. We will always have new startups innovation, but it's also trying to map the maturity of the fintech. And it is these days that quite a number of platforms, especially operating in the stablecoin space, got the license by the US regulator. It's so funny because bankers complained for a long time that fintech were not regulated, so they were playing on a different playing field. And now that they get regulated, they complain because they get regulated. So we're really entering a new phase when technology itself is broadly accepted from the regulatory perspective. So it is the right time to rediscuss all the topic that we can find in this book. Now, you spoke with quite a number of academics, business experts, fintech entrepreneurs in crafting this book. What surprised you the most?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Look, I think one of the key questions that we found fascinating, because with Patrick, we had to go through all the book, all the submissions. We had to work with every single author, and then we had to compile all this into finding the common story, finding the common thread. I think one of the key things that was really surprising for us was the fact that the speed of technological convergence, across artificial intelligence, blockchain, quantum computing, payments, and digital infrastructure. That was, I think, the point number one. The second key point was the fact that we see the global nature of fintech innovation, and we see also important developments happening not only at a Silicon Valley level, but we also see a global ecosystem emerging in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, in other emerging markets. And also, I think a very important point is that we see an increasing role that governments play and central banks play in shaping digital finance. Maybe with a more reactive rather than proactive approach, but still we see this kind of, collaboration, or even, let's say, co-opetition among the different stakeholders. And I think also what is also very important is that we see all these different business models emerging. But for me, what is mostly fascinating is the fact that we now see big techs or stakeholders who inherently had nothing to do with finance now being active, wanting to be active, but also that banks, and if I'm use the word banks because these institutions are the ones who actually have been prevailing within the financial services sector in particular, they realize that they don't need to own the entire supply chain or the entire value chain. So now we see more of an unbundling, and you know that very well within your own research, an unbundling of the value chain. So having what we call a plug-in and play ecosystems, competition or co-opetition is being elevated at the ecosystem level, which changes also the traditional dynamics of innovation, of entrepreneurship, of experimentation. But also, I think finally, what's the key message here is that fintech is really multidisciplinary, and it touches upon, elements of sustainability, ESG, geopolitics, ethics, and even brings disciplines which wouldn't even be considered in the past. I mean, there is a fantastic book chapter there with a contribution that connects, finance with space economy. So you see now the convergence of elements and disciplines, which is fascinating. So fintech innovation is no longer concentrated in few tech hubs. It is truly a global phenomenon and a truly multidisciplinary phenomenon.
So I take two keywords from your sentences here. So global and ecosystem. However, there's not such a thing as a global ecosystem. So do we have the same understanding about what fintech is around the world, or are there differences?
I think there are differences, and I think the main differences are related to how jurisdictions understand innovation, but how jurisdictions also understand regulation, and how open they are to open up to new ecosystem-driven business models. And I know this is quite a bit of a pompous and maybe, dubious word, but definitely I think the level of competition, as I said before, it goes into the ecosystem level. So we see banks in particular becoming orchestrators, opening up their vaults of data through APIs, inviting other organizations to join and co-create value. So I think part of this mindset shift, which is not easy, has to be attributed to fintech.
So, Dimitrios, what you're saying is that technology crosses the borders, but regulators don't. So that will always be different. It's also client habits, right? Because societies are not the same. Now, in this book, the Research Handbook on Fintech, you and your co-authors answer a lot of key questions about technology, fintech, regulation, and the intersection with established institutions. But there might be questions which remain unanswered, and we're all looking at the evolution of the banking charter with technology every day. So which are the key ones that you believe are the next that we will have to address going forward?
That's a lovely question, Paolo. And I think, as I said, part of the vision behind this research handbook is also to set a future learning agenda and a future research agenda. So I think on the top of my mind, I think a couple of research questions still remaining unanswered is, for example, how will AI reshape financial decision-making and risk management? Or what will be the long-term impact of tokenized assets and decentralized finance? Or how will digital currencies reshape monetary policy? And how can fintech maybe balance innovation with financial stability and inclusion? So the message here is basically that we still know a lot, but we're still at the early stages of understanding how digital technologies will reshape financial systems. And I think further innovation, which also, goes hopefully in the future hand in hand with more data, with more regulatory innovation as well, will allow us to be able to provide answers to these kind of questions, which also denote the multidisciplinary, I'm going to reuse that word again and highlight that word, the multidisciplinary nature. And as you also perfectly mentioned, the fact that fintech knows no boundaries, maybe except for regulation.
So I like that you also discuss the open questions, providing the pillars that needs to be, if you like, the student investigated to build the correct answers. In particular, I always complain myself that there's a lot of discussion about technology itself, like the blockchain, but no real understanding on how to redesign the monetary system in a way that technology is fit for purpose. Otherwise, the two might start clashing. The risk management, you talk about the decision making in terms of investment or risk management decisions, is super important. As we add efficiency, we use data, which is always incomplete. There's more velocity, but how do we deal with all of that? Do we have the meaning? And the means, the means to understand how to manage it. So these are extremely relevant. And knowing that anyway, so the progress is set. So we definitely are going to become more and more tech oriented in the way we access financial services and the way we manage relationship with clients. What do you see in the future of the financial system, let's say in the next 10, if not 20 years?
Right. I think the Research Handbook on Fintech, part of its vision and value proposition is to help us and encourage us to think about future financial infrastructures. And in the next 10 or 20 years, as you mentioned, some possible developments that we see is about programmable finance, especially when it comes to smart contracts, automating financial services. So less human intervention, more automation, but still keeping humans in the loop. I think embedded finance, and I know you've done a lot of work in the embedded finance space with being financial services integrated into non-financial platforms. And I personally find that fascinating, especially when you have non-traditional financial players coming in and they want to create value within a very highly and often heavily regulated ecosystem. I think the digital public infrastructure, think about digital identity, instant payment systems, CBDCs, and I think CBDCs will play a critical role, but always in the friction between or in competition between native crypto, but also stable coins. That means the private token issuance. And finally, I think finance beyond Earth. So, for example, I mentioned that particular book, a chapter contribution around, converging satellite data markets, space economy finance. So these are also some interesting aspects that we need to start seeing this kind of convergence. So in summary, I think, Paolo, finance is really becoming an invisible infrastructure embedded into everyday digital life. And of course, the common denominator or the enabler around that is technology, but technology also deployed in a responsible, ethical, inclusive, and also, socially sustainable manner.
So that's a very important concept. Like if there is one trend that explains a big deal of the transformation that is happening is the contextualization trend. So it means financial services are becoming more contextualized, embedded, invisible. And the reason that happens is because there are multiple opportunities to eliminate frictions within ecosystem interactions. To be very
Absolutely.
honest, Dimitrios, sometimes digital is the new friction.
Yes,
It
I
cannot
totally
happen,
agree.
right? But largely speaking, okay, the average.
Yes.
So that is basically the trend and the reason. And if we think about the technologies which are becoming more and more prominent, I think AI have been highly discussed. I guess that the blockchain DLT, what underlines stable coins, surprised the many because it's sort of a resurgence, like a phoenix, right? That is coming out of the ashes of some disillusionment about what blockchain was meant to be in the past.
Yeah.
But if there's something different today that makes it extremely relevant, I guess it's because there are centralized institutions that are looking at the decentralized finance perspective to transform themselves, and not to mention big operators like BlackRock trying to become, the infrastructure for market access, or the Union Stock Exchange, claiming they might be totally tokenized between 10 to 10 years. So the SEC says 2 to 10 years, more 2 years than 10 years. So sometimes transformation requires a lot of parties to get aligned on a common goal, and that's not easy. So when it's over-engineered, typically has a low chance to succeed. But in this case, when you have powerhouses, just centralized institutions that will adopt the approach, that will have a rippling effect throughout the rest of financial services. So I do believe that this time around, the stable coins and everything that goes around the tokenization aspects have a much higher chance to succeed than in the past. What do you think
and Paolo,
about
if I may say, yes, and reflect exactly on what you perfectly articulated, I think the real and underlying message, or the real story behind exactly what you said, is not individual technologies anymore, but it is the convergence of, AI, blockchain, quantum, crypto, digital currencies into a new financial system. There has to be, this kind of complementarities, and each of these technologies brings something unique. I agree with you that we're still seeing a lot of friction between fully centralized, fully decentralized. Somewhere in the middle, there is a lot of discussion happening also from the regulatory landscape in terms of how do we actually understand all these technologies and what do they actually mean. As you perfectly know, financial services is a very highly regulated industry. Therefore, everything has to be done in a compliant manner. And we have seen cases in the past where there were some issues around, non-compliant business models. And I think now the learning also goes into the fact that we have the tools, we have the data to sandbox innovation, do it in a responsible way. But I would probably say not fully permissionless, but more responsible. It's not about permissioning, but it's about doing it in a responsible way.
I remember that one of the key messages of my second book of 5, the Fintech Innovation, was that it is in the intersections of things that the new value is created. And now a lot of technologies are converging at the same intersection. Absolutely. So because they're maturing to be there, readily available at the same time, still requires a lot of knowledge and a holistic understanding of what is going on. But some institutions are really making the right inroads and we'll leverage it for the best. Now, before we conclude this episode 30 of the Banker's Bookshelf, which are the interested readers of the Research Handbook on Fintech? Who should read it?
Right. That's a really good question, and it's a very vital one. I know. Look, we wanted this book to be specialized, but also we wanted this book to be open for readership. So it's relevant for researchers, of course, and academics studying digital finance. Policymakers and regulators navigating new technologies and trying to understand what these technologies mean for their business and also their discipline. Definitely industry practitioners and fintech entrepreneurs. And this is why we don't only have academic scholars writing and contributing to the Research Handbook on Fintech. We've got also industry experts bringing this applied expertise in their work. And definitely graduate students, PhD students interested in financial innovation. The Research Handbook on Fintech, even though it has not been written to be served as, a textbook, it can also be used for teaching purposes and also creating master classes, creating thought leadership pieces, because it has real life examples. It has, recent examples from different industries. So the goal really here is to provide both analytical depth and strategic insight into the evolving fintech ecosystem.
So if there's an encyclopedia about fintech, it's the Research Handbook on Fintech, which is better than Wikipedia. Okay.
Yeah.
So I recommend everyone to check this work. You can find the Research Handbook on Fintech on Amazon. You can definitely follow Dimitrios Salampasis' work on LinkedIn. Please reach out. And I thank everyone for the attendance to this episode of the Banker's Bookshelf. Once more, the Banker's Bookshelf is our opportunity to talk to researchers and authors of the most interesting papers and books, which are defining the present of financial services and its fintech future. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dimitrios, for being
so
with
much,
us.
Paolo.
And
thank you.
Listen to the jingle.